I'd like to welcome everybody to our 5th instance of our engineering leadership meetup at Productboard. If I'm not mistaken, it's our 2nd or 3rd after our large COVID pause. It's fantastic to see so many people interested in engineering management, so we really hope we're going to be able to deliver some new insights, maybe a bit of controversy, but most importantly, also like answers to questions you're interested in. So if you're going to see on my left, on your right over there, we got a Slido running. We've been collecting a few questions from the crowd during the registrations forms. We have a few good inputs there already. But during the talk, we really want to make sure we're talking about what interests you. So if you feel, we're going in the right direction, talking about stuff that's not interesting for anybody, your best way to influence the meetup while it's still running is by submitting questions, and I'll make sure that we have enough time to address them. Today we chose a topic based on some of the feedback that we've gotten from the last sessions, and people were often asking us how to grow your career, what are the next steps you need to take when you become an engineering manager to progress further. I think we're going to touch a lot of other topics, but also after the end of this meeting, we're going to be super interested in your feedback. We want to make sure the meetup addresses topics and questions the community addresses regularly, so we're going to send that ask for feedback out as well. I've got 3 really great guests today with me, all directors of engineering from the Czech startup community. We got Martin coming from Muse, we got Jakub from Pipedrive, and Michi leading one of our tribes here at Productboard. My name is Wojtek. I lead Wojtek. It's hard to combine the 2 languages, sorry. I head product engineering here at Productboard. But before we start, I'd like to give our speakers a quick chance to introduce themselves. What's their role? How does their team look like? How they've gotten to the role and position they're at, and how their path looked like. Do you want to kick it off, Martin?
Sure. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. So once again, my name is Martin, and I'm currently working as engineering director at Muse. I'm with Muse for the last approximately 8 months. Does anyone know Muse, what we are doing? Yeah, so for the ones who don't, we are basically we are delivering software for hotels, property management system. Have you ever experienced a situation that you entered the hotel and you were waiting like 15 minutes at the reception just so the receptionist would take your name and give you a card to your room? Then that hotel was not using our software. We are basically trying to improve the guest experience and also increase the revenue the owner of the hotel gets from that. Size of the company, we are scale up. We are at 600 people approximately. 160 of that is tech these days, and approximately out of those 160, about 60 of us joined this year. So we were going through the massive growth this year. Before I joined Muse, I was working at SolarWinds for a number of years. For the last 5 years as a senior engineering manager, I was overseeing a couple of products SolarWinds was developing. SolarWinds is basically a company which delivers software monitoring solutions. So for example, competitors are New Relic or Datadog, basically software used by IT pros to monitor infrastructure system to make sure that everything is fine. At SolarWinds, we have grown from pretty much a very small company to a company which had over 3,000 people at some point. Engineering at some point I think was reaching about 1,000 people with teams distributed globally across the world. So that's my story.
Thank you. And Jakub?
Hello, good to be here. My name is Jakub. I'm from a company called Pipedrive. Sadly, I do not have any swag on me, so you'll need to remember it. Pipedrive, one word. All lowercase except the first letter. So we are a kind of scale-up company, around 10 years old, around 1,000 employees. Out of that, 400 in engineering. As a role, in my role of engineering director, I lead one engineering department consisting of 4 tribes. That's like a big team in our org structure. in total around 60 engineers. Pipedrive is a cloud-based CRM for small, medium companies. And I guess in my role, I focus on these kind of user-facing features. That's what my teams develop, not platform, not some kind of internal stuff, but user-facing stuff.
By the way, is the mic okay? I just heard.
I think you just need to hold it a little bit closer and it's going to be just fine.
I will do my best.
Okay,
That was
cool.
great.
So I will continue on the introduction front. So my name is Michael. As Vojta said, I'm working for Productboard as a director of engineering, and I've been working here for about, 3 years already. And there is probably no need to introduce extensively what Productboard does, but just in case, like, we are software that helps our customers build products that really matter. And we're doing that by collecting the insights from their customers and helping them to prioritize work and then even visualize that on their roadmaps. So that said, I'm responsible for approximately 1/3 of product engineering, which is one tribe in our way of thinking about the organization structure. That is approximately 30 people, including managers, organized in 4 teams. And besides that, we have 3 teams working here in Prague. One is fully remote. And before I joined Productboard, I was working for another big Czech company called Seznam in advertising division of that company. And I was leading part of development team there as well.
And I'd like to ask the audience to introduce themselves a little bit. And since we can go one by one, I know people always hate showing up hands, but still understanding a little bit the demographics, who we're talking to, maybe we adapt a little bit what we're talking about. Because there are so many definitions about engineering managers and leads, from the audience, who is currently managing people directly as a people manager? Who is currently contributing code at least once a week on a regular basis? Who is aspiring to become an engineering manager and is trying to figure out if it's worth it? Okay. Who is absolutely certain they do not want to be an engineering manager, but still want to hear what the fuss is about? Now that's one last thing. Who doesn't speak Czech? That's great. I think that's all. That's all the ones I had. Who is trying to figure out personally? Maybe that's a too personal question. So there might not be so many hands.
Do it.
We promised to be controversial, so now it's time.
For whom is the topic of the meetup? Like, what do the next steps to become a senior engineering manager or reach the next level in their company a relevant topic, and they're interested personally for themselves? And who's interested for the sake of their team members, and they're trying to answer that question for their team, for the managers they manage? Awesome, thanks. So I hope this is helpful also to our hosts. So I think we got a really good cross-section of of engineering managers, aspiring engineering managers. So I hope this is going to be useful. And actually, diving into Slido, we have a lot of questions prepared. But starting from engineers, what type of people become engineering managers? Very often it's engineers. And I'm curious to hear your opinion. Do you have to have a technical background, or what level of seniority as an engineer do you have to reach before thinking about a career path in engineering management? Is it even possible to become a good engineering manager, at least in your organizations, without a previous technical background? Any takers?
I might start, if you don't mind. I think it's possible, but when I'm looking historically at people I've met who were engineering managers, I think most of them, or most of the successful ones, were developers before. Then some small number or some other number had testing background, for example. At the same time, you probably don't expect those developers to be a real full stack, to know perfectly backend, perfectly front end. I think the same is with former QA guys, that what you don't know, it will be harder. You will rely on feedback. People will be providing on your direct members, so you would be able to evaluate them fairly. You will also need someone from the guilds if we are, for example, have communities of interest. We have a community for backend developers with some head of backend, community of front-end developers with head of front-end who are basically technical experts in the domain. So we will probably need someone like that to give you feedback on that person, and also to give that person inputs how to grow, how to improve in that area.
I want to add that I think very often it's good if you are not an expert in everything, because that way you will not rely on your expertise, but instead you will involve other people, right? So if you are the best or the smartest engineer in the room and you become a manager, I think it's a trap, because then you will have a tendency to decide yourself. So I would say it's very healthy if you are, for example, not a full stack engineer, or at least not the best one.
I would say that I would agree on the point that you don't have to be like a full stack engineer. However, I have like strong objection against like, if you have no developer experience at all, it's gonna be super hard for you, to be able to challenge team efficiently and to understand like whether the level of investment is actually the correct one. So like in my own experience, I would prefer that there is a solid developer background. Like I'm leading the product tribe, so I would even expect the engineering manager or the engineer to have like a product delivery background, not a platform one, for instance. That helps a lot, like basically because like the challenge is slightly different, and like less things you need to learn on the fly, the better for you. So like this is the best starting point to become engineering manager in actually product engineering, if you are like a product engineer right now.
I'm just curious, like from the three of you, do you all have an engineer, individual contributor background?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long did you stay in that role before considering switching to engineering management? How long was your career like as an individual contributor?
So for me, it was on and off. I actually was engineering manager, I think, twice before Pipedrive, and then I always got back to individual contribution. In total, maybe 8 years as a developer.
Nice. Just a note, I also have some new engineering managers just joined recently company, and I also wanted them to start as individual contributors initially, at least for a few months, because it's really important to know the product. I was working as individual contributor for a couple of years. Then we had this dev lead role, which was not a fully featured manager. It was something in between. So something around 5-6 years of individual contributor experience, I guess.
Yeah, for me it's very hard to tell because like I was basically coding like since high school, but like as a professional engineer, I would say for about 3 to 4 years. And I must say that it wasn't my decision to become like engineering manager. Like at the end of the day, it was, but like there was an opportunity, and just I was told that I'm expected to hire some more engineers, and I eventually became like engineering manager, and I actually liked that, so I was lucky enough. But
yeah,
you sound like our prime minister. It wasn't your decision. You had to do it. But can I get back to your point about that you wanted your managers to start as individual contributors? I, from my experience, can highly, highly recommend it. Like for me, it made my job when I moved into engineering manager so much easier to have that experience of individual contributor, right? I knew how it works in the actual factory, or how to say it. And I had the network, like really, really much, much simpler.
You are then very helpful to your team if you know where to touch stuff, can guess what the cost of the implementation would be, and can challenge the decision, stuff like that.
just to wrap up this topic, and without saying the name, do you have somebody on your teams, or have you worked with somebody who didn't have that background and was just super successful? You'd love to have them on your team. That just when it seems like we have a pattern here. What was their secret? What was the skill they relied on? Do you recall somebody in your teams like you feel fits this category of not coming from that traditional background?
I would have one which had QA background, but that guy worked as test engineer for a couple of years, was super knowledgeable about the product, cared a lot about the user experience, and utilized all these skills and others to be effective manager as well. I don't have anyone who would not have any engineering background.
One of the, to get us a little bit on the topic of EM and senior EM, and looking at the questions from our audience, somebody is asking if we expect software engineering managers to code. Different companies have different opinions on that. What's your stance, and is this a differentiating factor between an engineering manager and a senior engineering manager, or not?
I would just start with, it's up to you as an engineering manager to consider how you can be the most impactful, and I certainly can say that probably it's not your coding, because you can easily become a bottleneck. However, I think that it's good to keep the contact with the code in a form of, let's say, doing code reviews, or coding occasionally some minor fixes, or fixing some bugs. But hardcore day-to-day product delivery in Productboard is something you probably shouldn't be doing regularly, I would say.
Probably should not be doing that much, even as engineering manager, or at least in the companies I work with, it was almost the last priority for you. So not enough time for that.
And I will say that in our company, we have a bit different model where engineering managers usually have big teams, up to, let's say, 20, 25 engineers. So they are never expected to write code because, of course, they have other duties full time.
Yeah.
Is the mic a bit on and off? Okay. Fine. Okay.
The team says it's good. Problem between microphone and chair. We can swap microphones for a second. Just do an A/B test, or.
I will give it another try.
No, but to your topic, actually. So that's so coding is not the high impactful activity, or not most of the time. What is, right? So when oftentimes in career letters you have clauses about engineering managers focusing on high impact strategic work. What is that work? What do you in your experience, if the engineering managers didn't do anything else, dropped all the other balls, but focused on one or two things? What are the things that actually matter they do, where they're irreplaceable, and what's nice to have?
I would say there are no one or two things. Mm-hmm. That's the catch, right? It's always something else, and they need to recognize what's most important at this point of time. Sometimes it can be recognizing that there is no team spirit in the team, and they should work on that. Other times it can be something completely different.
Yeah, I would agree. At the time we were growing rapidly, number one focus for me was actually hiring and sourcing and approaching candidates, because this was the most impactful thing I was able to do in order to help my team grow. Whereas currently, as we're slowing down the hiring a little bit, we are more focusing on stability and team processes, and going deeper into the strategy. So it's what the time requires, and the manager needs to basically do whatever is needed for the team success.
Maybe a few more things. I would also call out delivery, that basically engineering managers in making sure that we are working on the right stuff, everyone is aligned, there are no surprises to stakeholders, to anyone. Then people, ideally people first includes hiring, but also making sure that people on the team are happy, not gonna resign anytime soon for reasons that there are issues we are not fixing. And those are probably the top two things with immediate effect.
Yeah, actually it is the case because you cannot let go any of your responsibilities at any time. You need to have at least somebody who is, taking care instead of you, delegation of your responsibilities. But like what requires your primary focus, that's typically like different thing at the different times.
So if we talk about skills, maybe this main skill is actually recognizing what needs your attention and putting it there.
When it comes to one of the aspects I think we even have built into our career ladder and that I often hear phrased from directors when it comes to differentiating between EMs and senior EMs is that the people need less support, that they're more independent. Imagine you're a director and you have an engineering manager on your team, and one of the things that you're telling them is, I need you to be more independent or take care of yourself. Where do you find yourself needing to support engineering managers in your team most frequently? What's kind of taking most of your time? And for you would be the biggest help in terms of, being able to focus, say on setting the strategic direction for your tribe or department? What do you encounter most frequently that, you need to step in and support?
So I would say that for more junior EMs, it would be the kind of day-to-day situations in their teams. For example, issues with people, or let's say prioritization questions and things like that, really operational, tactical stuff. And for more senior ones, it can be something like how to convince someone, or how to drive a project in the company, how to really make impact. So what I'm trying to say is that it differs a lot based on the seniority. I think all of them require support, but they require support with different things.
Yeah, I would say that with less senior managers, you're starting as a manager, so you're maybe even a little bit more opinionated in the way engineering management should be done. Whereas with the growing seniority, you're shifting more to the coaching approach because you probably don't have to be the smartest person in the room anymore. So you're trying to advise and somehow point the person to the right direction rather than suggest the solutions. That's my opinion. Whereas when the person is really junior, sometimes you need to be more explicit and maybe even provide a little bit of suggestions of what is needed at the moment.
When it comes to yourselves, coming as one of the questions from the audience, how do you learn to get better at what you do? When you look at let's say the past years, what were concrete things that helped you improve in your current role, or that have helped people on your team?
I would say that I'm a typical example of learning by mistake. So in my past experience, especially in Seznamail, I failed quite often, and I learned how not to do engineering management, and I'm basically trying not to repeat the same mistakes twice. So that's my way of learning. And here at Productboard, I also saw some role models I'm trying to replicate, or that inspires me in a way how I do management. So it's a combination of both role models and fuck ups from the past.
I know you, just staying with you for a moment, I know you've brought even external coaches to Productboard. Do you find that as an effective way? How do you use coaches as an engineering leader?
Yes, actually that wasn't my first coaching experience. Beforehand, I felt like coaches can fix all of my issues or solve all of my problems, but that's not how it works, and that was actually a big fail, a big mismanagement of expectations. And coaches work really well when you have a clear thing you need to work on, a personality trait you need to fix, or communication style you need to adjust. But in general, it doesn't work that well in my own experience if your only goal is to become a better manager, like you need to know what is like what is the gap. And sometimes the coach can help you find out, but like it's probably usually a stranger, so it takes a lot of time to establish like a mutual understanding of who you are and what you actually want. So it's much more efficient to come with a goal for the coaching.
How does Muse and Pipedrive work with this? Do you use any sort of external coaching or mentoring for either yourselves or the engineering managers on your teams?
We don't have any global coaches, external coaches that everyone would use, but we have a pretty generous training budget, and engineers and engineering managers and whoever can use it to hire some external coaches. And I, for example, myself did it this year, and it was pretty good. I agree with you that it's best to have a specific topic to ask for help with, but it's great. And I think it's great because this external coach, he or she has time for you, which is not always true with your internal kind of manager or a mentor. And also external perspective helps, right?
We have accounts for Plateau. If you guys are familiar with that platform, it's basically a coaching platform. There are people from even like large and big tech companies like Google, Facebook, but also from a lot of startups. So we, for example, give our managers opportunity to get a Plateau account, and you can schedule whatever sessions you might want with various people. But as Michal said, it's the best to basically have a problem and maybe then schedule 5 sessions with people from 5 companies to understand how they are understanding that problem instead of having some general sessions.
What's your experience with that? Because like I have quite mixed feelings about it. We have Play-Doh as well, but like
it's mixed as well. Like I currently put it on pause because I also have some other stuff I basically want to implement before proceeding further. But from the 10 sessions I've had, I think maybe 4 or 5 of them were really good, and the rest of them were pretty much just explanation to the other party how we work, and maybe not that good use of time. But for the 4 or 5, that was interesting. And please?
I wanted to ask about the same, actually. Would you recommend Plato? Like, I know you just explained, but if you were to summarize it, because I was negotiating with them as well, actually, but never.
Maybe just a quick check. How many of the team how many of the audience is familiar with Plato? Right. So just kind of to make sure that we're all on the same page. It's a web service. Like you pay per seat per manager, and essentially there's a pool of mentors which do it for free. They come from companies. They usually connect you with somebody one level higher than you, and you can essentially connect with like this kind of unlimited pool of people and discuss whatever you feel is an area you want to improve. So their business model is simply that the company that looks for mentoring pays a seat per month, and I think all three of the companies have been using it on and off. Actually. Who uses Plato actively, just from the audience or as a mentor? Okay.
Nobody does. Like just for completeness, there is like a Czech version of it. I don't know if it's so popular. Probably it's not like a family palette.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have like a mentee experience there, but it's good for like a managers to try mentoring there if you're interested. Like I have a very good experience, trying to mentor somebody and trying to share the experience with somebody from outside of the company. So I can recommend it.
What's the name?
It's Femapolet. I think it was originally meant to help women in tech, but now they repurposed it a little bit, so it's for everybody.
Who engages with an external coach on a regular basis, either paying out of pocket or the company supporting it? Just curious. Not a lot. It's interesting. Who would be interested in it? What do you think is limiting you? Just the budget, or just curious about if there's any reasons? Okay. That's a great answer, actually.
May I get back to that question for a bit? That except for coaching or mentoring, I think the best way is to learn from each other and from ideally mistakes of others in addition to our own. And what was working pretty well were really communities of engineering managers. We had, for example, in SolarWinds, we had one large one, and several smaller ones, and for example, one of the smaller ones called Fosaci was the one which was producing the best guys, solving the problems which went through the whole engineering organization. So yeah, I would probably recommend it as well, in addition to possibly some buddies which can also help.
Wow, that sounds very inclusive.
It was before inclusivity was a word.
And did you receive a lot of help from your own manager? Like when you were already a manager, did your manager help you a lot?
Yeah, I was very lucky on the managers I had in the past. So yeah.
That's maybe that's a good, like in the past, like if you look at people you've reported to as engineering managers, what was for you the most welcome form of support? What kind of helped you the most? What did you appreciate the most when it came to direct support from your line manager, looking back into your career?
For me personally, I like that some boundaries are set, but I have a lot of freedom how to operate within those boundaries, and also some safe environment that I can tell my manager that I messed up. I know I will not be punished immediately, that we'll try to find solution and work out that problem. And that's also what I kind of try to build with my like direct reports, that something like no surprise policy. We should be honest to each other and do not hide anything from each other. That's what I like.
And I will say feedback. I find it surprisingly hard to come by really good and honest feedback. And it's also true when you are a manager. So yeah, I think I would appreciate that. I got some good feedback, but I would appreciate even more, I would say.
Like feedback is like a general problem, because like it's lonely at the top, and people from the bottom might look at you as superior, or somebody with a higher rank, and it's sometimes very hard to get like a valid feedback from bottom up. So it's crucial. We're doing these performance cycles where people can provide feedback async. So those are at least 2 points in time where you get really like a valuable feedback, like deep feedback.
What do you think are the next options to naturally move into after being an engineering manager? Do you see people in your teams staying in that role forever? That's kind of the sweet spot they're found. Do you feel it's inevitable to try to go for a director level role? Do you feel there are other paths that are not just getting better at the role and staying stable, climbing the career ladder? There's just like an alternative option. We frequently talk about it when it comes to individual contributors, like be an IC leader, be a deep technical expert, become a manager, like that. There's paths. What are the options for an engineering manager?
I will say maybe not what the person is asking for, but I will say that there is literally no shame in getting back to individual contribution. It's very valid path. You just tried engineering management, not for you, all right, get back. It's not a promotion or demotion, it's just adjacent path. Really fine.
I think it happens a lot. I know some engineering managers who move to product owner role, for example. They really liked influence on the product, but they did not want to deal with that many people issues, so chose product owner.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty common that I hear like somebody just doesn't want to deal with people and their issues, so they're moving back to IC path, like where you can in fact there you need to deal with people as well. You just doesn't have to manage them. That's the only difference.
A wide and open-ended question. For you, the differentiators between a senior EM and an EM, actually getting to our topic for today, what comes to mind? What do you feel? I mean, it's probably not as easy as identifying one or two things, but what do you feel is like non-negotiable?
For me, it's that the senior EM is not stuck just inside of their team, but they are able to see the big picture and basically go wider in the scope of their work. So typically they will have things nicely automated and delegated in their team or teams, and they will spend their time on, let's say, engineering-wide topics. And I think that junior EMs are not able to do that. They are kind of focusing on purely their own team.
Do you feel in this regard, sometimes I hear, I didn't have the opportunity or I didn't have the platform or space to do that. Like I've just had responsibilities in my team. Do you feel it's the EM's responsibility to go and find those opportunities across the company or their wider team to improve, or is this something they should wait for and, more of a stake in the company?
It's definitely their responsibility, like 100%. I'm not saying that the company shouldn't create those opportunities and be appreciative of EMs stepping up, but no one will just give you things on the golden plate.
Yeah, I think it's also about people being receptive to seeing issues within organization and realizing there is a problem. A lot of people who moved from engineering manager role to senior engineering manager role were basically identifying problems in our engineering process, in the hiring process, in the collaboration with recruiters, collaboration with support, and basically they were coming up with solutions to these problems themselves. We can definitely help them because sometimes we are aware of some topics and we are kind of offering it, but they should be also able to identify some of these topics on their own.
Yeah, I will start with what it is not for me, because like I interviewed many engineers or engineering managers lately, and like for me what it is not is the size of an organization. Like empire building doesn't make you like a great or senior engineering manager. And in fact, like some of the managers leading organizations, I don't know, more than 50 people or something like that, were like not really great and maybe even like suboptimal during the interviews. So like for me, it's all about the impact. And in fact, like the distinguishing in between like a normal EM and the senior EM, that's like probably specific to every company where you want to draw the line. But in fact, the value for the company should be like increasingly higher for the senior role. So you can have like even more than that. You can have like a principal group EM. Some of the companies only have one, and the only differentiator is like money maybe. And then in the startups, really small startups, you can have like a VP person who is actually doing coding or leading a single team. So it differs, based on the company size, maturity of the company, and also like the needs. But in fact, what makes a difference is the impact, like regardless of what it is, whether you can optimize some processes across all the teams. You can help to level up your colleagues and step up into higher role by coaching and mentoring them. You can help project managing a very critical initiative for your company. Or you can do whatever else that has a significant impact on the business that makes a difference.
I would like to add to the thing you mentioned about the size of the team. I think it actually can be a red flag, or not can be, but it is for me a red flag for managers if they try to optimize for the size of their team, right? Typically maybe at the expense of others, and they try to grow, more people, we need them. For me, a senior engineering manager would recognize that maybe it's not a good idea to grow their team, and maybe other teams should grow.
Yeah, in addition to that, it has something to do with how your team is structured, like the whole department maybe. Like typically I saw that set up in the companies that had like component teams that were not delivering like end-to-end customer value on their own. So like the manager was just like a proxy in many cases, proxy passing the directions, from the top or from the project managers and so on. So like more ownership and accountability you can give to the teams and potentially to the leaders of multiple teams, like the higher impact. Usually, I'm not saying that it's in all of the cases, but usually you can find.
Switching gears just for a moment, there's a great question about, just in general, about people management. It's about finding the balance between like the emotional connection or emotional or professional relationship you have with your team. And I don't mean emotional in a romantic sense, but I don't think that's allowed. But can you befriend and manage people at the same time?
Well, I do it. I like to kind of be close with people in my teams, but at the same time, I think it hurts sometimes that it would be better if I wasn't like that, if that makes sense.
Had one experience when my friend from university joined the company to work with me. At the beginning, we had the gentleman's agreement that if it will go south, we just depart and won't make our lives difficult. And unfortunately, after a few months, it had to be this way. But I think if you have a specific feedback for that person, it's not a surprise for that person that it's not going the ideal way. It's really accepted in a good way from the other side as well. I was sometimes really surprised when I was, for example, delivering bad news when we are approaching the end of the probation period. I was delivering the bad news to the other person, how really they were not surprised, they were not defensive, they accepted it because they had heard that feedback numerous times already. It was not surprise. So if you do it well, it can be done.
Yeah, I would say that like being friend with your people makes it a little bit easier for you in some way, and makes it also terribly hard in some other ways. So like, you know, there is probably no like rule of the thumb to that, but like I had it in the past. Like I was always trying to, you know, hang out with, you know, all of my team members, go for beers or for dinners or, you know, team building and on all this stuff. So inevitably you will create some kind of a relationship. You just need to set like boundaries for that in which you operate, because, you know, otherwise, and I had that feeling a couple of times as well, that like people are, you know, starting to be rude when you're, you know, delivering the negative feedback, or, you know, too offensive, because like they're forgetting about the hierarchical structure, and that you have the responsibility as a manager for the results, not only for the you know, as somebody said, emotional part of the thing.
Talking about hierarchy, do you feel, how do you feel about a hierarchy versus flat structures? Is it EMs report to senior EMs, or senior EMs support EMs and then to directors? Is it more just a differentiation in terms of structure? How are either flat or hierarchical setups working for you? Or like which one do you, which camp do you feel yourself, your company and your team is in, actually? Maybe just to start it off very quickly.
We had a recent reorg, and now we are, I would say, semi-flat on the management layer. We are pretty flat on the individual contributor layer, but semi-flat on the management one. But we came from a very flat management layer when one kind of VP of engineering had 18 engineering managers as direct reports. And I can say that was terrible. Like that was really, really bad. So we split the role into 4. Now each engineering director has 3 to 6 engineering managers, I think. And I think that's a pretty good ratio. When it comes to titles, it works like this, that EMs and senior EMs report to directors, but I think it's pretty much just a coincidence. It doesn't have to be like that.
How does it work for you, Martin? Flat or hierarchical?
I'm not a fan of completely flat.
You are or not?
I am not. I think what works quite well is what we have at the Muse these days, that engineering manager has one team, there is and an engineering manager is reporting to director. If there was a senior engineering manager, quite likely that person would be like super good, but would be still managing, for example, just a single team, plus having some additional activities with high impact outside of that team. SolarWinds used to work slightly differently. In SolarWinds, typically engineering manager had 1 or 2 Scrum teams, so they hardly did any coding themselves, while at Muse, we still expect, at least for some smaller teams, engineering managers to do coding. But so in SolarWinds, 2 teams per engineering manager, and they could either report to director or to senior manager. That sometimes, for example, senior manager was responsible for the whole area of products, which were somehow related. for example, had to be released together and had complete control over, I don't know, 5 teams and manage them through the engineering managers on those teams. Sometimes senior engineering manager could also be direct manager of one team, like of all the team members. There were a lot of combinations what could have happened.
I'm maybe curious, Jakub, like what led you or what led the company to go for flat? I often see like flat is sometimes pitched as something like better or more advantages, like agile to waterfall or like similar examples, and I think people feel it's like this kind of promised land. What drives that? What drives that motivation? What drives that feeling? What is the company pursuing in that regard?
So to be very specific, when this one VP was managing 18 EMs, he was just not capable physically to support them properly. So it was, and we got there. It was pretty kind of slow process. We are a pretty self-organized company, so we started as, I don't know, one VP with 5 EMs, and over years we moved to one VP and 18 EMs. And it was this process of this frog boiling where you don't notice how bad it is because it's just gradually getting worse. And then suddenly when we split it, it was really a big relief. And I think the reason is that kind of EMs also require support from their manager, right? And they need feedback, they need directions, they need help. And if the manager is not able to give his time, that's a big problem. So it's as simple as that.
I would say that actually we came through a very similar transition because like when I joined 2 years ago, we only had like a flatter structure as well. So EMs reported directly either towards our Daniel, and Daniel had like, our CTO had like 12 or maybe 15 or 12 maybe approximately EMs, something like that. And we have decided to create a tribe structure, and basically we introduced like additional level of management where each tribe lead is managing like some part of the product. And I think that it was exactly because of the same reason that like we needed a bigger support of the manager for the reports. So yeah.
It can often, from what I'm hearing, like the primary motivation for hierarchy is actually that the managers get well supported. Sometimes maybe the criticism of like a hierarchical structure comes from teams. Would you from that get affected? Maybe like bad flow of information, similar reasons. Why do you feel hierarchy can get a bad rap? What can you do to counter that as a manager? Because I know I'm making a big assumption here, but like we do it for ourselves in a way, basically, because we need to be able to have more time with our teams, but how to counter some of the negative effects that the wider team can see? Or what have you seen maybe gone wrong when there was a more hierarchical structure?
Yeah, so if I can start with the negative example I had, again, from my previous company, like if you split the teams in the wrong way, so you create dependencies by default, so basically not following like a Conway's law, where you're shipping your org structure rather than, building teams around like logical business units. That makes a lot of confusion, and that's exactly where the org structure is more like a detriment than helping to make things more efficient and better. So in order to prevent that, I think that it's crucial to have teams designed in a way that they can own a part of product end to end, and they can make, let's say, give or take, autonomous decisions within some guide rails. That's crucial, to minimize dependencies and communication overhead.
I think what also sometimes we can hear from the teams is that basically they don't know what, for example, upper management is doing, or anyone above their team lead, what they are doing, and that's why they also see a higher level of management as redundant. And for that, I think we really need to give them visibility into like problems we are solving and sharing the stuff we deliver also with teams, not just like team leads or within ourselves.
And one more problem with hierarchy I see in my current company is the information flow from top to bottom and kind of bubbles down. And if you have multiple levels and multiple kind of verticals, when the information gets to the bottom, it's different for everyone, and that sucks.
That sucks real bad. What's an effective team size? What's the cap? Just give one number. What's the largest team like you feel a manager can handle effectively?
I will be controversial, and I will say 25.
Michi?
I would say like for an EM, ideal for me like is 5. Josko, don't listen to me. Like we have some of the folks currently having more than 10, but like it's interim state. Ideal in my eyes, it's 5 or 7, maybe the maximum.
I guess it can be between 5 and 12 that I've seen teams executing very well when there were 12 of them, but they had to adapt to the practices they were using. So not everyone would be involved in each discussion, for example, and other stuff.
So yeah, I just saw a question in Productboard. We don't have 20 or 25 directs with EMs. Joska, there is an unfortunate exception. No, but he's doing a great job holding the fort for us in a team where we're hiring for an EM. So appreciate that. When it comes to a good question. Not a soft skill, actually, a hard skill for EMs. Do you have experience with serious personal issues between two engineers? How did you tackle it? Do you ask for external help, or when do you go ask for external help, either from your manager or from HR? The wide question, but maybe it's story time without saying names.
Is it the conflict between two engineers, if I understood correctly?
That's how to question it, yeah. Or two people between your team in general.
So I experienced it in my previous company, and I handled it very poorly because I was trying to kind of coach them, make them talk to each other and work it out. But one of them was so pushy and so opinionated, and the other one was more like diplomat. That I should have noticed that it's never gonna work out, and I should have either, I don't know, move one of them to other team or let one of them go. But it was like half a year of pain, and I think this time I would have done something more drastic quicker.
Yeah, so I have 2 cases, or two points in my past experience. So one is again from my previous company, where I also dealt with it in a very suboptimal way, and I basically did nothing except trying to advise people how to talk to each other, find a common purpose that didn't eventually work out, and these people were really frustrated. So we ended up in moving them to different teams. But I would also act like more drastically if it was again. And I actually had the chance here in Productboard where we basically hired a person who was like bright technically, but not really great on the soft skills side. And we needed to decide, very quickly to let him go because like it was super toxic. So that was a decision I made in Productboard to let the person go when we experienced like interpersonal conflict in a very rude and unprofessional way.
I recall one historic situation a few years ago when one person was kind of against the whole team, which was kind of weird. And it was a very tricky situation because that person wanted the right things to be done, and the team, they were kind of on the loose for the last few months before that, so they were kind of doing what they wanted to do and didn't want to obey the new product owner. And it was really tricky because what the team was delivering for the company was of a very high value, and we didn't want to lose them. At the same time, the product owner was right, and there was a tension and conflict between them. We did some marriage counseling. I've included like additional manager who would not be there from the position of power to kind of try to discuss with them different point of views and stuff like that. But in the end, we had to separate them. Like it was beyond repair, and rarely it happens that it's beyond repair. In this case, if both parties are valuable for the company, it's better to find different teams for them than lose someone.
Do you feel transfers are usually work, or is it just delaying the inevitable?
Well, it really depends. You typically don't want to transfer someone. If you are not happy with someone's performance, you do not want to transfer him out to have someone else deal with your problem. So in this case, no. But if really this was purely that they couldn't work together, and for this specific case, the team got the new manager and PO, that PO got a different team, and I think pretty much for the next at least 2 years, they were working fine. So I would guess that in some situations, at least, it works out.
I would say, in my case, it depends on what is the core issue you're trying to, or you're observing actually, in the behavior. So if it's coachable within a reasonable period of time, and then it's already beyond some point where the current team can respect the person, it's maybe worth trying a second shot. But like, if you don't believe that it can be repaired in a reasonable point, within the reasonable period of time, it's better to let person go and find a new one.
Yeah, I often like mention when talking, and we talked about it with Michi a few times, like there's this concept like from like romantic relationships that break apart, like of a tipping point, that like the events or kind of the situations that led to the ultimate like breakup like happened far in the past, could be months and years, and like very often like in professional relationships, like in the workplace, like when you're dealing with some of these issues as a manager, the core issue is like so far in the past and it's like beyond the point of no return, and like that's kind of where it hurts even the most, kind of like delaying something. And so typically like one of the biggest kind of yellow flags for me, yeah, they're somehow getting along, they're both professional, it's gonna be all right. And I'm like, yeah, so we probably reached the point yesterday. And so that's kind of like one thing that I do often see. That's why I ask. Another a very common, or at least like it comes up in the meetups and the questions, going back to the audience. And I'd encourage everybody, if you want to upvote a few questions, we're about an hour in. I want to also give you time to meet everybody here. I think we can go deeper into some topics. So I'm gonna work with about 3 or 4 last questions. So if you want to upvote, if you want to specifically hear some answer, definitely this is the time to upvote, and I'll focus on those. But back to the question, the responsibility and the overlap between product or project managers and EMs. How often do you deal with that as an issue? Does anything help to resolve that tension if it appears? Maybe first premise, is that a source of tension in your teams, or is that something that you feel you have really well figured out?
So we are talking about the third question from the top.
I think they're pretty connected.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Regarding the pushback, I think definitely EMs should push back on requirements from PM if they think they are not reasonable, right? Not by default. It's one of the skills of EM to understand the product, to understand the user, to understand the business, and they should be partners to the PM and really kind of build the roadmap together. I think the roadmap is the overlap is there. The pushback should be there, both sides, by the way, and yeah.
I agree. This is probably one of the most difficult parts of the EM job, something people are not used to when stepping up into EM role, that they will really need to make people sad by saying no and pushing back against a lot of things and pushing for example, technical things from the technical roadmap. These negotiations are sometimes difficult. This is where engineering managers often need, for example, our assistance with this.
Yeah, I would say it can work like that both ways, because like when you have like a really strong EM who is like super good in arguing, they can push back and too much, maybe a little bit too much, and over optimize things. But like both, or in our case, the whole trial is there to help our business to grow. So like all the parts needs to be reasonable and look like what is the best solution at the current point of time. So like each part represents their side of the barricade, but like at the end of the day we need to work together on defining the roadmap.
I will maybe state the obvious, but it's important that even developers push back if they are asked to work on something they don't agree with. I think it's a really, really strong skill of an engineer to have this overlap into product. And one funny thing, I noticed one, like, let's say, situation where there was an engineer and he was really strong in that kind of pushback and really voicing their opinions and maybe, let's say, complaining as well. But then they became an EM and they suddenly didn't do it that much. And when debugging the situation a bit, we arrived to conclusion that when the person became an EM, he suddenly got responsible for those things. So it wasn't just something they can say at a meeting and then go back to their computer and code their JavaScript. But when you are responsible for making decisions and for pushing back, it's suddenly much, much more difficult.
Is this an argument for putting engineers more in positions that they have responsibility to make decisions? Do you ever struggle with that in your teams? Or have you encountered that as an issue?
I totally think that's the right way to put engineers in the positions where they have responsibility. Perhaps temporarily, let them try it, and that's how they will become EMs.
I had just one other note related to pushing back. That back at the previous company, the typical career path to manager, at that point called development manager, not engineering one, but changed shortly after, was to go through product owner role or program manager role, depending again on the time. So, and as a product owner, you are getting requirements requirements from product, design, architecture, support, whoever, and you need to basically decline like 80% of them. And that was a nice university of saying no and pushing back.
That was a requirement to go through that role?
It was not hardly specified, but it's something like, I don't know, 80% of the managers went that way.
Never heard about it, but it sounds pretty good, yeah.
It's actually very similar to that. It's just like a one-time negotiation technique. Where the sides needs to switch seats, and like product manager needs to argue to make a technical investment and vice versa, and it's usually like really hard for the people to argue like about the second person's point of view. So we tried that in the past and it was fun, at least.
Fun to watch or effective as a conflict resolution?
No, I was even participating myself, and like it was a great eye opener for me, because like I was like, okay, so that's
seriously worth trying.
Yeah, definitely, like role playing basically.
Mm-hmm. Getting a lot of upvotes in the last 2 minutes. The crowd is asking, what criteria do you use to divide people in teams? Do you use functional teams, cross-functional teams? It's parts of the product. What's kind of the partitioning key when it comes to how you divide people into teams?
I may start. At Muse, we have basically full stack teams. Doesn't mean that everyone on the team would be doing everything, but we want to have some backend engineers, some front-end engineers, and they are typically responsible for a certain product surface. So certain set of functionalities, the product.
Yeah, to reduce dependencies, so between teams, which usually means have full stack teams, vertical teams.
Yeah, and I already said a couple of things about it. So we have like product teams, and for each product area it's different, but basically the mix of competencies you need to deliver end-to-end value. So like combination of backend, front end, and maybe even full stack. So
how often do you find yourself managing dependencies between teams? Do you try to avoid it at all cost? What's your go-to solution to do it when it's needed, when something is bigger than one full stack cross-functional team?
It can be never avoided in my experience. There are always some projects that requires like multiple teams to participate, but like the org structure should be designed in a way that it minimizes the dependencies. or you need to have like a really solid and good way how to manage them. So
Actually, I'm setting up Michal here a little for the question because like we've really optimized for no dependencies, and now managing them at Productboard is arguably one of our weak spots. So I'm asking for myself actually here.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, I think we might have done the same. Yeah, we have few of them, but when they appear, it can be a struggle. So what we did, sometimes we need to resort to kind of top-down prioritization, and we say that some project is really strategic priority for the company, and all teams should prioritize this one.
Yeah, for the cross-team dependencies, I think at Muse, speaking of my teams are typically handling them between themselves. I think two of the teams I'm currently managing have probably still too large area of responsibility, so a lot of like dependencies are coming in their way, and there is an idea to have future splits of those teams to reduce this issue.
yeah, and I will maybe share a little bit, you know, from under the hood, from the process that is currently in the making. So basically, the teams are organized around the product surface areas, which means that they can truly own a piece of product. They can acquire a deep domain and, you know, even a technical knowledge and ownership over some certain part of product. But in some of the cases I have just mentioned, with the very large initiatives that are going across, it's just preventing them from, you know, deliver end to end, because they would have they would need to have the knowledge in too many different areas, and like with the size of the code base that is growing, like that's not cognitively possible for anybody to capture the full size of the problem. But like still, like it's very beneficial to have somebody who is responsible for the value end to end. So we are experimenting with the T-shaped model of, you know, one team owning the product surface area and have like a very deep understanding of a particular domain, and also like horizontally a job to be done, or, you know, some wider initiative across the boards. But like in other teams, they only have like a coordination function, and, you know, they consult the full story, or, you know, the wider picture. So I don't know if it's working or not, but like that's, you know, our latest thinking about how it can be organized.
Or another approach is also to have mission teams delivering some of the stuff. That, for example, I have one of the teams I have is mission team, which goes to wherever they need, to areas owned by other products, and those other teams are doing just code reviews, and the space-time team is implementing what needs to be done.
Yeah, that's actually, you know, a hot question as the last one, because like I have some objections, especially because of the document stages, and like I assume that you create the mission team for the initiative or for the mission. So it's like temporary. They're not working together long term.
Of course, there are a lot of issues with the ownership afterwards and stuff like that. On one hand, the fact that the team which will own the code these days is doing the review, so it's not that someone does the shitty work and throws it over the wall. They have full control over whether they accept it or do not accept it. That mitigates it, but yeah, it's not a magic bullet.
So when you say mission team, you mean some kind of workforce created across multiple teams?
No, I mean a stable team which works together, but does not specify only on a certain area of the product. They basically are experienced to go whenever needed.
So the team stays together, relationships stay, but the underlying code changes.
What would be the use case where you would use this kind of structure?
Well, for example, historically, Muse was delivering a software for hotels, and the main use case was that it was possible to book a stay overnight. At some point, we wanted to change it in the way that it would not be the only product, or the only bookable service would not be staying overnight, but there could be other bookable services, not necessarily tied to tonight. And it, for example, required changes all across the product. So this is one of the things they done. But recently, for example, we are implementing role management. Instead of ability to assign individual user privileges to users, we had a need to have role management, and this team was tasked with this as well. And again, they do whatever changes need to be done.
I think it appears like one of the cases where I hear is like you want to ship something and the teams tell you, oh, that's not possible. And you dig deeper and like, oh, because we would have to talk to that other team and that other team. And that like it's kind of like a way to break through those barriers by just giving that responsibility to like a cross section of the company.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more looking at it that in ideal world, which probably doesn't exist, but I, for example, would imagine we would have a global list of priorities we want to implement, and we would be having teams just pull in from that. Obviously, we would need to figure out the code ownership and who does the maintenance and stuff like that.
The global backlog, basically. Yeah, we tried it once in previous company, and it didn't work.
It's tricky because with the code owners, like we had that issue lately, that like the owning team needs to do all of the PRs, and in some of the cases it might be even like 50% of their time or of the individual's time who is doing the PRs. So like that's where it gets really challenging, because like basically you need to review all the work that the other team is doing, or delegate that approval authority to somebody else. But then you need to have a trust that they know all the context to make a decision themselves.
Maybe one last question, and that's about work-life balance. I think it's a really interesting one. Do you see differences in work-life balance between individual contributors and engineering managers? I think it hints that engineering or maybe I don't know, maybe people think engineering managers' work is easier, but typically I think it's actually people find it more stressful. Do you feel that's inevitable, or how do you feel about this? Do you see the difference there?
I see a pattern that new engineering managers really have terrible work-life balance because it takes time to learn how to maybe delegate, let go, and so on. But I think that experienced ones, there is no difference, I would claim. And I think the point you mentioned about stress, so yeah, that's definitely a typical problem for engineering managers, and I think it's very good skill to kind of let go things or like learn how to cope with stress and just say, okay, that's work, I will solve it tomorrow.
Some of the people are naturally more like workaholics, and it doesn't really matter if they're ICs or managers. Like I saw, many ICs working long hours and staying over the night even to finish the tasks. So like that's not about being managed, but I agree actually. If you're new to the role, you tend to become like a micromanager or try to solve all the problems in the world at once, and that makes your life quite hard. So more senior you become, more able you are to delegate and to prioritize the problems that are truly important to be solved at first.
It's more about individuals than roles.
Do you have any ritual to like separate work from your personal life? How do you make that change?
Commuting at least 30 or 40 minutes to the office and back. So, physically separated space where I work and where I have my personal life. And also like I'm usually listening to the audiobook on both ways. So that's like my resetting trigger to, start focusing on the other stuff.
Wouldn't call it ritual, but what works for me is when I'm stressing about something in the evening, for example, about work, I just stop and say, it just work, like fuck it. I don't want to say like I don't care or I become complacent, but I lower the priority of that thing in my head.
Yeah, just like I don't think it's a big deal for me specifically. Like at certain, for example, at certain time of day, I need to walk out the dog, and completely clears my head.
What works really well is like running, and like the bigger the problem, longer the run. So you eventually become a marathon runner, as I did.
So like Strava is your stress meter then. No. Thanks for all the answers. I wish we would go through everything, but at the same time, again, I feel part of the value here is like being able to meet people in similar role situations. I'd encourage everybody to stay. I'm gonna be staying. We have people from Productboard. We're gonna have our speakers hopefully stay for a little bit. If you know each other here, open a circle. Try to get somebody you haven't met before into the conversation. If you see anybody listening, we're gonna be open for tonight. So grab a beer, grab a snack. Feel free to stay around. And our meetup today is coming to its conclusion. Normally we almost didn't have this meetup today because like our whole audio video system completely exploded in the afternoon. So we've been able to make the microphones work. So I don't have a QR code for feedback, but if you've signed up, we're gonna definitely send out a feedback form, and we'd love to hear about what you felt is interesting, what you feel we should skip next time, and we're definitely gonna make sure to work it into our next 6 engineering leader meetup, and we really hope to see everybody here one more time. And with that, I'd really like to thank Martin, Jakub, Michal for their time today, for their insights, and thank you everybody for coming.